as someone who is a presenter of art, whose role is defined by the institution as being a performing arts presenter, meaning that we bring in visiting companies and they perform. There's a part of me that feels a little defensive in the context of this conversation. Because there's a lot of conversation about the notion of watching as being somehow not passive, but more passive, or maybe less constructive, so I wonder about that. I wonder about what role, is it important to show our students and our community to host artists who are working at the top of their field? Is that important? What's the university's role in terms of doing that? What's our role in the development of new work? We are premiering in the next 2 weeks. We're premiering, on Saturday, we're premiering Steve Reich's new quartet for the Kronos Quartet. It's commissioned by us along with Carnegie Hall and the Barbican in London, Granite Center at the University of Illinois, Dartmouth, as well as the Doris Duke Foundation. It could have premiered at any of those other places. It's premiering here. Steve Reich has only written 3 quartets. He's only written 3 quartets ever, including this one. The first one he wrote in the late 80s, early 90s, Different Trains, essentially changed classical music in many ways. That was written for Kronos, as was his piece Triple Quartet, as is this piece, WTC 911. We've cultivated a relationship with Kronos Quartet because in some ways we feel like their aesthetic aligns with ours. That being, to describe it simply, sort of as almost a handmade aesthetic. We could go on and on about that, but we're commissioning a piece. We're doing an event this evening at the Pinhook in downtown Durham. We've done a series of these listening events, and so it's Steve Reich and David Harrington, who's the artistic director of Kronos Quartet, and it's moderated by Steve Jaffe, who's a composition professor here, distinguished composition professor, to put those sort of distinguished folks in a downtown bar for a conversation is a pretty radical. No, maybe it's not radical. It's buzzworthy, perhaps.
It's an active engagement.
It's an active engagement. What we have always tried to do is to provide some of the context behind performances. We've tried to provide context behind the performances that we're offering, and that has to do with some of the reasons that we've pursued a sort of thematic approach. So that will world premiere, and then we've also commissioned a piece from an ensemble called The Bad Plus, and they're making a new version of The Rite of Spring, which will premiere next Saturday. And they've been involved over the last 2 semesters in a pretty substantial engagement with both the Durham community and with the graduate PhD program in composition, which is, until the MFA launches, the only terminal creative arts degree at Duke. So they've been playing composed. So the notion was, okay, we're bringing an ensemble that's gotten great reviews everywhere in the world, has never played in North Carolina. How do we introduce them to our community? How do we engage them in active work with our students? We did the same thing with Jason Moran a couple of years ago, and he created a project called In My Mind. Again, I felt like that was developing leading edge work. I think that's the project that ultimately netted Jason the MacArthur Prize.
Of which he owes us a part of.
Yeah, money. He needs to make a contribution to Duke performances. Or CDS. We could take it on a percentage of how much each of us gave to the project. but I guess I would, you know, so I think that those are interesting things, right? So I think those are interesting projects and things that we participated in and developed, and I wonder sometimes at Duke, and here's me being a little gloomy, right? You know, at some level, we all need to describe what our engagement is going to be with the community, and that needs to be part of the way that our work is evaluated, right? So if engagement with the community is not part of the evaluation process of whether Duke performances is successful, then we're doing it because we feel it's a value, it's an important value of our work, but you know, it's hollow. If that's not part of the larger picture of what Duke Performance's mission is, it becomes hollow. I mean, if you look at the strategic plan, say from about 5 years ago, Duke Performances is just described, and the way it's described is that we should bring world-class artists, and they should be here and they should participate in residencies here. That's it, period. Right? So it's like, that's a strange mandate, you know. You know, the unspoken mission is that we're supposed to engage with curriculum, we're supposed to engage with community, we're supposed to increase student attendance, we're supposed to develop cutting-edge work, we're supposed to work with a cadre of leading artists and of the world's leading artists, we're supposed to have a sort of, you know, we're supposed to generate positive publicity for the Duke brand, but all of these things are unspoken.
And sell lots of tickets.
And, well, right, and so the only criteria is how are we measuring up against revenue. So in a sense, engagement becomes a way to generate audience. Mm-hmm. So that's and to me that's like that's a problematic approach to engagement. You know, and then the last thing I would say is like. So a very interesting thing happened last week that the Duke Endowment gave $80 million to renovate 2 new arts venues and the West Union. And that renovation was not described, that donation was not described as a gift towards the advancement of the arts at Duke. It was described as a gift to advance student experience at Duke. Which to me reads, and we could argue about this, but to me reads as extracurricular as opposed to something that is at the core of the Duke education. My suspicion is that when people who raise money for Duke were asked, they said that it was going to be difficult for them to raise money around the arts. But that student experience was something, this is conjecture, but it's not, but that student experience was something around which money could be raised. So that gives me pause for concern when the conversation is about, well, we're going to have a Lunar New Year celebration in Page Auditorium, or we're going to, all those things are going to happen, but Page Auditorium and Baldwin Auditorium are principally performing arts venues. Right. And the renovation of them should principally be
To make them first class.
To make them first class, not so much for our student ensembles, although our student ensembles will benefit, but so when we bring some of the great artists in the world, they're able to work effectively in those spaces, and our students are able to engage, our students and community are frankly able to engage as patrons or viewers in a way that they're able to get the best possible experience. So, so these are all, it's a long conversation, right? I apologize for taking up more than my 10 minutes.
Because that means I have less.